All right, let's bring it back home now. Solidarity says it will challenge the unconstitutional Employment Equity Amendment Act, which was assented into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa last month. The Labour Union said that the law granted draconian racial powers to the Minister of Labour and Employment, and its legal team would serve court papers soon. Now, let's get the latest. We are now joined via Zoom by Solidarity's Research Institute head, Connie Mulder. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Connie. What about the Amendment Act?
Thank you, Noti.
What about the Amendment Act then is unconstitutional for you, and what will then your legal submission entail?
Okay, Nati, so when we look at the Amendment Act, I think the section that worries us particularly is Section 15, which gives the Minister power to almost arbitrarily publish sectoral targets on provincial level per employment level, like top management, senior management. And the Minister has actually published these regulations. And what this entails is you've got a minister that from the union buildings can suddenly decide what every single business in this country should look like, with severe penalties attached to it if you do not comply. And this, from our perspective, is akin to a quota system, which is expressly prohibited. We do not want to move to a situation where we're once again having quotas for certain races in the labour market. And that is the gist of our legal team submission would be. This entails no longer targets with incentives. It's now a quota system with much more stick and much less carrot.
I see that the DA will be joining you in your submission. Just talk to us a little bit about that partnership, particularly at a time where South Africa is really experiencing the effects of inequality at a larger scale. So I think a lot of South Africans would also want to know where you stand in this partnership.
Yes, so it's not only the DA, we've got NIASA, the Employers Association, the Freedom Front, the DA, and from what we can tell, several other parties that are going to join this court case. In terms of what the problem would be with this legislation is if its goal is to eliminate inequality, it's not going to make a dent. And that what we need to do to actually get people jobs is we need to start fixing the education pipeline. And this is a veiled attempt by the government, who has dismally failed in providing people with the requisite skills and qualifications to actually get this economy going, to now try and take a shortcut, which is not sustainable, and which will lead, if our calculations are correct, to a loss of almost 2/3 of the white and coloured labourers in the top 4 levels, as well as 1 out of 4 coloured people who are working in the top 4 levels will have to somehow be moved from those levels to match the targets that the Minister has published last week Friday. Now, this cannot be the way that we rectify anything. If the argument is going to be we need to do this level of social engineering to get to a situation, then that is a very dangerous slippery slope of the end justifying the means. And that is why we have no choice but to go to court, and we're not going alone. Several parties have joined us to say that this is not the country we want, and this is not the way that we're sustainably going to get everybody into a job, because that's what Solidarity wants ultimately. Is we want everyone who wants to work to be able to work, but the only way to get there is to start fixing the education pipeline and to then enable, on top of getting load shedding fixed as well, to get the economy going, because economic growth is the only way we're getting out of our dire poverty situation as well as our dire inequality situation.
So another of your concern is that you are worried that this will, keep businesses small and cost thousands of jobs. In fact, other people and other organizations are in fact worried about Section 53 of the Act that specifically talks to the turnover threshold for employers, and which they say creates some form of loopholes that would ensure that, number one, companies who do not want to employ black professionals, including coloureds and Indians, as you've mentioned, don't do that. And number two, it creates a loophole for companies not supporting transformation to unbundle into subsidiaries that might employ less than 50 people. So even on that state, there are complaints, but not in the sense that you are saying.
No, so those complaints, I think, if you find a company that expressly says we're not going to employ a black professional, that is something that we need to take to the Equality Court as quickly as possible. That's unfair discrimination based on race. And what we're seeing is we're seeing companies are saying we do not want this regulatory burden. This is a massive amount of overhead that suddenly we need to do. We need to start every single company in this country. If you read the sectoral targets that have been published, they are impossible for any country, any company in this country to actually meet, which means every single company will have to apply for a Section 42 exemption from this law. That is a massive regulatory burden. If you're throwing that on employers on top of load shedding and on top of really weak economic growth, it just creates a dire situation. And ultimately, we want companies to employ more people. We do not Honestly, we do not care what color the people are employed. We just want companies to be able to employ whoever they think will be able to do the job to make them more profit and ultimately get more people into the labor market. This law will incentivize the opposite. It will incentivize, unfortunately, companies to go smaller. And if you look at some of these targets, they're completely unreasonable. For example, if you're 51 employees, it is impossible to comply. If you have got one Indian employee, that's more than 0.2%, which is the allocated amount that you should have. So it will just simply be impossible to comply. This creates a very dangerous situation where the minister will be able to decide which companies comply or not, because no one will be able to. And it just creates unnecessary red tape. What we need in South Africa is we need to make doing business easier. It's already a really hard road. You need to get load shedding sorted. You need to make sure that you comply with all labor regulations. Adding more will not create more employment. It will only reduce employment in the country, and ultimately, no one wins when less people have jobs.
And in fact, the bill says quite the contrary, according to government. Amongst the new measures that it proposes to have is that it will promote diversity. And not necessarily, as you say it, making it increasingly difficult for other sectors, and that it will also promote equality in the workplace. As we wrap up this conversation, just your final thoughts on the transformation agenda of this country. What is Solidarity's transformation agenda? What do you want to see happening in the workplace?
So do take a note that this is the same government that promised us in 2014 that load shedding will be gone in 18 months. They also said that. And they said that they would be listening to comments regarding the NHI as well as the Bella law, and they did none of that. So government saying something does not actually make it what will happen when this bill is implemented. From our perspective, the only real way to get inequality sorted is to get poverty sorted. And the only way to get poverty sorted is to desperately fix the fact that 81% of grade 4 children cannot read to comprehension in this country, that the university system has started dismally failing with producing graduates who can actually take the economy forward. This is all government's failings, and now they're trying to take a shortcut out of this to suddenly try and take a shortcut to unsustainable transformation. The way you transform the economy is by getting people the requisite skills and then allowing them to do in free enterprise as they want. We need more of that, not less. The Solidarity's mission, our statement on this has always been stop regulating businesses into the ground and stop interfering. If you just fix the education pipeline, if you're fixing this part of the machine, the rest will take care of itself. Government has failed to do that for 29 years. We do not see this bill changing that situation at all. It's only going to create this unnatural situation where businesses will have to create unnatural entities to try and jump through more hoops. This is not the way we're going to get poverty sorted. We need to give people skills and empower them. And this will be a shortcut that will ultimately lead to ruin.
Connie Mulder, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Of course, Connie is Solidarity's Research Institute head, and they will be taking government into court over the Employment Equity Amendment Act.